Welcome to the Undercovers Football Podcast. I'm Ben along with Paul and Connor, and we're here to recap week one of the NFL free agency, specifically mostly the Bills moves, but we also have
There were moves. Is Ben dying over there?
it's that'd actually kind of be a fun thing to do. We should do a bracket challenge, the three of us, and see who creates the best bracket.
Oh, yeah,
that would be
bragging
cool.
rights. And
Yeah, it would be y'all.
I hate doing this,
Absolutely
Connor,
would be y'all.
but I think my pick is going to be the Gators. I don't know. I don't want to pick them, trust me.
Blech.
But I don't know. Something tells me that team
I
is
have
just
bracket
stacked.
over here.
Who do you got winning it, Paul?
I will
Kentucky. I know you're a Kentucky
I
fan.
have
On principle alone, I will not pick the Florida Gators. I am
well, my
sorry.
final four.
I'm not
My
doing it.
final four looks like this: Michigan State, Florida, Duke, Clemson. Florida wins it all against Duke.
See, Paul and I kind of think alike, so that's probably what my pick was looking for. I know Connor is probably going to pick some random ass schools like
You got that right.
Arkansas Aquatics College or something like
Oh
that.
my god.
I don't even know that's a real school, but I don't know. You know, like those kids who like pick, like they'll make their brackets and just pick it based off the mascot. And sometimes they actually
Oh
do
my
better than like
God.
the actual experts.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yes.
that's how Connor will make his picks. It's like who would win in an actual fight,
I'm just gonna
a gator
all of-
or I don't know.
let me just put all the picks into a randomizer. and
That
just
I mean,
do
that
it like
honestly,
that.
you have about as good of a chance as that hitting as the actual picks. But
Mhm.
speaking of
Did we lose him again?
Did Ben go frozen?
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
I
he.
did.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
sorry.
believe he's having some technical difficulties.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Perfect. So
Whatever you said during your log jam, we didn't though.
right. So speaking of picks, the Bills will have some picks in this upcoming draft,
Thank heavens.
and based off of just mirrored Paul.
Oh, and there he went. I was wondering when that was going to happen. You can't hear him stuttering all night, and then just boom. There it
Yeah,
goes.
Okay, Ben. We'll
But,
start with Connor's first take.
He
Sorry
did have
for
a
the
he did have a valid point though, because we
we
definitely
have
did
draft
make
picks.
we have quite a bit. As a matter of fact, I
Yeah.
believe we have 10 or 11. What
10.
was it? Okay, it was 10. This is the most draft picks that I've seen out of any team I've ever rooted for in roughly 10 years. I can remember the last time the Steelers had 10 picks. I have not seen that amount of picks since. So, oh my god, he's back. Okay,
Back
he's
chat.
it, he's trying. Give him credit.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi there, Ben.
I blame Spectrum, as always. I don't even know if he uses Spectrum. He's in the area.
That's no, I do. I do use
I knew it.
Spectrum, so that is a
I knew it.
that's a good place to blame.
I knew it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Like normally my stream is a lot better. Maybe
Yeah.
it's because I have too many windows open, but can you hear me now?
Most likely.
Yep, you're good now.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're
We'll see how
good
long this
now.
lasts.
So I'll just pull up everything else on my phone.
Yeah, there we go.
Worth.
Okay. So we're about a week into free agency. So you know, it's kind of setting up free agency is setting up the draft as far as what we think the Bills are going to do.
His internet is actively fighting him tonight.
I don't know what it is, man.
It's all them windows. But
and
no,
not just the bill. This is
there he goes.
crazy.
Spectrum is fighting him. There's somebody
Yeah.
there's somebody at the office who runs the internet to his house that must be a Dolphins fan, I guess. They knew we were going live tonight and said, "You know what? We are going to give this guy a hard time." But what he was saying was, we've made some moves. We have 10 picks, and we aren't the only ones to have made moves in the AFC East. Of course, it seems as if we've made minor moves compared to everybody else because that's just how it is as a fan. When you're sitting there watching your division rivals make moves, in this case, the Patriots, you're just like, man, can we do anything? But I know that a lot of us are like worried that we're not going to wind up re-signing Christian Bedford, but I think we will. I mean, doesn't he have one more year on his contract?
Yeah, we're trying to extend him.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, but doesn't he still have 1 year on his contract?
Yeah, so it would be 2025, 2026, and he'll be a free agent after the 26 season.
I can honestly see them waiting until next year to kind of get the deal done, even though I see, why they're trying to do it now. But it would make just as much sense in my mind if they let it sit and, folded the matter until next offseason, even though I think, it'd be better if they could get ahead just because, other cornerbacks are going to be up for extension soon.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be behind when the market inevitably takes off. But
All right.
regarding the quick take itself, though, I would actually still say that the one with the best offseason to this point has actually been us, only because of the amount of talent we've been able to retain. And the names that we brought in aren't, bad players. I mean, Joey Bosa, for heaven's sakes, when the man can stay healthy a full 17 games, he's an elite player. Look at the 2 seasons that he's played full time and just look at how great he's been. Oh, there he is.
Hopefully this works and I don't go frozen again. Otherwise, I don't know. I might just have to do it off my phone or just not do it tonight. Well, all right. I was just hoping, Paul, you stood very still there, and I thought you froze again. I got a little nervous. But I think we're good for now.
All right, let's get you into your first quick take. So let's do an AFC East check-in then. Outside of the Bills, which team in the AFC East is having the best offseason?
Well,
I mean, hey, this is a very, very difficult question. You had to give him the hard one, Paul.
Yeah.
You gave
I
me the
mean,
easy one.
all right. Am I back now? Hopefully.
All right, you're back now. Oh man, these Wi-Fi issues, man.
Okay.
I blame Spectrum.
Yeah, no, just keep blaming Spectrum, and they are the result of every technical issue.
Always.
This is kind of an interesting one because as far as the off season, obviously it's not done, but
Hang on, real quick. Did I miss something? Debo Samuel was wearing
based
the number
on
1
what
with Washington.
they've done. I'm gonna try it without a camera. Can you hear me?
Hear you.
I don't know. Something is up with my internet tonight, so I'll just do it without a camera.
That's fine.
But as far as the moves that were made, I think in totality, because we obviously know the offseason isn't over, You still got the draft, which we'll talk about later. But based off of the moves they've made so far, I honestly think there's not a clear-cut winner. But if I was to give an edge to who improved their respective team the most, I would say New England, because they brought in Mike Vrabel. You can kind of see the kind of identity that team wants to be, which is kind of how the New England Patriots have been historically, which is win games with a dominant defense, a good run game, and these nobody receivers. And it kind of checks all those boxes as far as the how Bill Belichick built his teams. The only issue is Bill Belichick always had an elite to great offensive line in New England. And right now, you got some DoorDash workers and Amazon drivers protecting Drake May. And if they don't get him some protection, he could end up like David Carr did back in Houston. Like I tweeted earlier, like they signed Jared Bradbury and Morgan Moses
And there it goes.
right now, and they had the money to go out and get. Was it Daniels, the tackle from Pittsburgh, who signed to Tennessee?
Yes.
Okay, right. So they had the money to go out and get a Daniels. They could have gotten, even Mekhi Becton would have been an upgrade over Jared Bradbury. I know Will Fries signed a decent contract. I mean, there are other guards that they could have at least signed in free agency other than the scraps from the Vikings and signing the Jets leftovers and Morgan Moses. Like,
Well,
Matt Collins was their
you know what? I'm glad his internet cut out right there. I don't want to be reminded of the Patriots
only
signing Matt Collins.
big addition at wide receiver, and according to reports, they. What's that?
Oh no, I was just saying because you kept cutting out a little bit. I was like, I'm glad you cut out at that moment when you started mentioning Matt Collins. It's like that was meant to be. I don't want to be reminded that the Patriots signed Matt Collins. You could even see it on Matt Collins' face that he did not want to be there. He just was there because the Bills didn't want to bring him back. Either they didn't want to bring him back or they couldn't bring him back. You could see it in his eyes in that Welcome to New England video. He was just so depressed. At least he looked depressed. Oh, and there he goes.
Let's get to your quick
Spectrum has
take,
claimed
guys.
another victim.
We're having technical difficulties tonight, guys. I mean,
We're like Spectrum difficulties. Ugh.
all right. Let's see, Ben.
Yes.
You there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Cool. We can hear you. Let's get to Connor's quick take so we can get the show moving just a little bit.
Right. It's taking like a year take at this point with the internet issues.
Yeah, for real.
But no. I mean, quickly. I mean, they could have signed Chris Godwin. They offered a significant money to him. But he ended up turning it down ultimately. The Jets, they're the Jets. They let go of DJ Reed and gave a massive contract to Brandon Stevens, of all people, basically a traffic cone from the Baltimore Ravens secondary last season. I mean, we all know what Justin Fields is, not a starter in the NFL. Miami still is doing everything but protect Tua, but they'll sign Jags like Alexander Madison. They'll sign.
Paul, I think my theory was proven.
Between the Jets and Miami, I think they're equally having a from the other AFC East teams as far as this offseason. But yeah, I mean, to me, I would say New England definitely had the best offseason between the three teams, though.
I think out of the three AFC teams, besides the Bills, I think New England by far is the best out of the other three. I mean, Miami just, they're signing B to D class players, like.
I mean, they brought in Artie Burns. Just ask Connor about Artie Burns.
Oh, man. when I tell you that all they really had to do if they wanted to get a guy even better is just trade a 7th-round pick to the Cowboys to get Noah Igbehoggany back, and they somehow managed to do worse, is hilarious. That Artie Burns is not even a player that you could say he's a depth signing. That's not even depth. That's a waste of a roster spot. Like, if you can manage a guy to be worse than Kyer Elam or worse than Noah Igbehoggany, even worse than Eli Apple, yeah, it's Artie Burns. If he has to start, oh man, throw to that side of the field at all times. If he sees the field with the Dolphins against the Bills, offensive game plan, just throw his way the entire time. He's not going to catch. He's not going to be able to stay in tune with guys like Shakir, not Josh Palmer, not Keon Coleman. Oh man, that'd be some highlight reel worthy plays right there. Keon mossing Artie Burns,
right.
but oh man, I could go on.
All right, Connor, let's make your quick take a really quick take.
Okay.
Like, really quick. If Bengals can't bring back Hendrickson, can the Bengals compete with the rest of the AFC?
No. Is that quick enough?
No, I mean it's quick, but I mean you could give a few points
Well,
of
yeah.
analysis.
It's a team that's basically tied their cap space to 3 players: the quarterback and the 2-star wide receivers. They have pretty much 0 run game. Their offensive line is kind of suspicious. Their defensive line is terrible, aside from Trey Hendrickson. Their linebacker room is kind of meh. Their cornerback and secondary room is atrocious. What do they think they're really going to accomplish? They're going to be able to put up all-star numbers with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins against teams with bad secondaries. But once they run into a team that actually can put pressure on them, they're just going to fall apart. I guarantee you. Well, I can't say I guarantee you because the NFL is weird. Anything can happen any week, any given Sunday. It would not surprise me if the Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC North, I'm just talking the AFC North, went 1-3 across the entire division because the Steelers know how to take care of them. The Ravens know how to take care of them. And they'll probably wind up splitting with the Browns because the Browns are the Browns. We all know
1-3 or 1-5? Because you're missing a couple of games there.
1-5.
I was gonna say, aren't there 6 division games unless they change? The Bengals have a new schedule.
Now,
No,
I
I agree with
don't
you.
remember the Browns. The Browns are
yeah, I mean the
irrelevant.
Browns. To be fair, the Browns don't really count as an actual NFL team.
Nah.
But I mean, we saw last year, even with Trey Hendrickson, they weren't able to compete with the rest of the AFC. So how is that team changing with even less available cap space now? Like, yeah, I agree 100% with Connor here.
Oh, it's going to be bad. This is the modern way of thinking, apparently, that offense wins everything, but it doesn't. They're going to find out the
If you
hard
win
way.
the football game 45-42, you still win the game.
Yeah, but that's just it. They're not going to put
know.
up 45 to 4. They're not going to put up 45 points on everybody. Not teams with
can't,
good
no.
secondaries.
100%.
Beginning of today, this morning, Matt Milano took a pay cut plus a year off his contract. The 30-year-old has battled some major injuries over the last 2 seasons. Torn bicep last year and a fractured leg and an MCL tear the year prior.
Man.
Maybe all signs pointing that the Bills are probably done with Milano after this season. Do you guys feel like this pay cut is a sign towards that?
Yes. I'm quickly gonna give a shout out to Cover One because they do great work as always. But they had the Bills' defensive captain Terrell Bernard on their show this week, and he kind of hinted to the Bills are going to be playing more man coverage going forward. So I think looking at some of the signings the Bills made, like Michael Hoyt, maybe not as much Ogunjobi or Joey Bosa, but looking at some of the signings, the Bills
Spectrum does not like Joey Bosa.
have made, and some of the coaches they've added to the defensive personnel is going to change going forward with some of these philosophical changes. And I think Milano's obviously included in that. But I think they also would like to get younger. Nothing against Matt Milano, but obviously a 30-year-old linebacker is not going to have the same athleticism in the covers game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, with all the new coaching additions they've added and a player like Michael Hoyt, who's almost like a Swiss Army knife, because he could even drop back in coverage. Because I don't know if you saw that highlight of him locking down DK Metcalf
I
in
brought
the
that up last
slot.
week.
Yeah, but I mean, you can use him as a Swiss Army knife for almost like a chess piece on the defense. I mean, unfortunate that he got suspended, but they did sign him to a 3-year deal, and he's still young enough. But I think with all the moves they've made on the defensive side of the ball, I'm not shocked in the slightest that this is probably the last season of Milano, and I think they did right by him. Like, they're gonna give him one more year to play out his time in Buffalo, and hopefully, he can win a championship here, which would be poetic in his final season. Maybe if everything goes right, he resigns on a cheap 2-year deal, because I don't know how much a 31-year-old Matt Milano is getting on the open market after missing almost 2 out of the last 3 seasons. If he could stay healthy even this year, knock on wood. But just between the different coaches they've added to the staff, like a Ryan Nielsen, I believe that's the guy they got from Jacksonville, right? To help with the defensive line.
Yeah.
And Bernard's comments, I mean, you could just kind of see that they're finally changing up some of these defensive tendencies.
Finally.
Yeah. Matt Milano has been a great player for the Bills over the last, over the last like 5+ seasons. I mean, all pros, just making big tackles when needed, forcing fumbles. But minute this came out, that's where my head went. You're taking a year off his contract. You're giving him a decent pay cut, and you're going to take about $11 million in dead cap in 2026. This is probably the Matt Milano farewell tour this year, and if that's what it feels like. He had 2 major injuries over the last 2 seasons. It's really just going to come down to this offseason is, are the Bills willing to lose the production and leadership of Matt Milano? And there's a couple of factors that comes into this. Injuries, age, and depth at the linebacker position. You look at the state of the Bills linebacker position, you have Dorian Williams, you have Terrell Bernard, but I mean, the young guy in Joe Andreessen is coming through. He seems like he could be a difference maker for the Bills in the linebacking room. So the Bills might be looking at, okay, we got Terrell Bernard, who is great, who is young and is entering his prime. You've got Dorian Williams, who can play in coverage, and as to really to Ben's point and what Bernard is saying, they want to play more man. That's perfect. That's a perfect mold for Dorian Williams, who can cover a little, who can be the linebacker in coverage for a little bit. So if their plans are to change their defense and philosophy, it probably leaves Matt Milano to leave after the 25 season. And he's been great for the Bills over the last, since he was drafted in Buffalo. But this all indicates to me, maybe I'm wrong, but this is probably the last season of 58 in Buffalo.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I saw that this morning, I said the same thing. The only reason you take a year off of a guy's contract and you give him a pay cut is because you're getting ready for him to leave. You want him to have one more year because, heaven forbid, he, actually, there's 2 sides to this. Either one, something else happens and your point is proven and you let him go, which hopefully that does not happen. Or 2, and this is probably what I think the Bills are hoping happens, is that Matt Milano stays healthy and has this all-star, all-pro kind of year and make them go, all right, now we're in a tough decision. Do we actually give him that, do we extend him again, for another couple years, injury concerns be damned, or do we still, let him go, you could basically, if he has a great year, dangle him as trade bait because somebody would do it, even with the injury history. I had a note that I was going to bring up on this because I had actually seen it on Twitter the other day. And when I realized what they were trying to say, I was like, you know what? This would happen if this is the case. So I'll go ahead and get to it quickly. What I think will happen is if Milano kind of has, a meh year, but he manages to stay healthy, you know what? Here's what's going to happen. I am not a time traveler. So if this happens to come true, this was all just a random guess. What's going to happen is they're going to let Matt Milano hit free agency. He's not going to sit long because some team is going to look at his past tape, someone who's very, very familiar with how Matt Milano has ruined their lives in the past few years and go, we could fix him. And what you're going to wind up seeing is a tweet from either Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, somebody else that says, breaking news. Former Bills linebacker Matt Milano has signed a 1 to 2 year deal worth X amount of money to the Miami Dolphins because they will believe they can fix an injured player like Matt Milano if he has one of those years that make the Bills let him go after this season. And what's going to happen is they're going to have that same kind of idea. They're going to be like, we got Milano, we got Phillips in the same locker room. Let's go. We got an elite linebacking room, only, to have both of them be very prone to injury. And that's nothing against either Matt Milano or Jalen Phillips because I love them both. But that just seems too perfect the scenario to happen if Matt Milano has, another down year and the Bills are forced to let him go because the move they made absolutely
I
signifies
think
that they're ready to let him go.
I think the only issue with that though is that Phillips is more of an edge rusher, outside linebacker, whereas Milano is your prototypical off-ball, weak side linebacker. So
Oh yeah, no, I mean you're absolutely right, Ben. But that
I
has
think
not.
I think
That's
the
not going
route
to
they
stop
would go
there.
would ultimately be through the draft.
Mhm.
Maybe I mean I know some people want Jihad. Is it Jihad Campbell? I believe
Yes.
out of Alabama, which I've been one of them, but he's not really a fit this year. And with Milano taking a pay cut, that locks him in for this season. So as much as I would like Jihad Campbell, that's not really helping the now. It
Nope.
would help the future though. But I think the Bills have more pressing needs now. Before we move on, we did have some news that broke during the show. I don't know if anyone saw that, but former Super Bowl champion wide receiver Mecole Hardman is heading
Oh,
to Green Bay.
I
Um,
did see that.
that was a massive signing.
Massive.
Not really, but
Huh,
let's
Huge.
move on
Big.
to a couple other players that could see extensions on the Bills. Obviously, are entering their contract seasons, and Christian Benford and James Cook. They've already locked up, obviously, Shakir, Rousseau, and Ben Bernard, who we mentioned earlier. Kyler Elam, the first round pick that year, is gone, which
Oh,
Beane
thank heavens.
obviously kind of regrets that pick, just hearing from his press conference. But there's been a lot of movement in the cornerback market this offseason between guys who are free agents getting paid and guys who are still on their rookie years getting paid. Derek Stingley Jr. becomes the highest paid defensive back in NFL history on I believe it was a 3-year, $90 million contract with all but $1 million of it guaranteed. And if you look at the metrics, Christian Benford is absolutely in that Derek Stingley Jr. only issue with Benford is obviously, can he stay healthy? That's been an issue every year of the playoffs since we drafted him in the 6th round. His rookie year, he missed a lot of time with injury, and that's why we had to rely so much on Kyer Elam to begin with. And honestly, Kyer Elam showed a lot of positive signs in that time while Benford was out injured. But obviously, Benford has been the better player. But an interesting predicament now. I know a lot of people aren't for paying running backs. And yes, running backs are definitely replaceable. But if you look at McDermott's defense, they've kind of been able to turn some mid cornerbacks into very good players. And I'm not calling Benford mid, but he was a 6th round pick. So the way McDermott identifies and develops talent at corner, are you going to pay a corner $25 million to $30 million a year?
Spectrum really doesn't like it when he tries to
Won
talk about
the
a Christian
playoffs
Benford extension.
versus the Cook versus Benford debate, because $25 million to $30 million for a guy who can't stay on the field with how McDermott develops corners. I mean, you could pay Cook $15 million and still have $15 million at your disposal to even sign a lesser tier free agent corner in the future, or you just go out and draft multiple corners like with your first pick the next couple of years and just hope you don't have another Kyer Elam. I mean, it's a very interesting debate. I kind of see it from both angles. Like, Benford is absolutely elite and does deserve the money, but with his injury history, do they risk another Tre'Davious White situation where they pay this corner who actually had less injuries than Christian Benford does currently, and they really had no knowledge of Tre'Davious White, who was an all-world corner at the time, defensive player of the year candidate type corner, of him not being able to stay healthy. But we have seen Benford have major injuries. And honestly, if Tre'Davious White didn't get hurt in 2021, the Bills might already have a Super Bowl by now. But we all know how that season ended because Levi Wallace had to play significant snaps in Kansas City in the postseason. So, but the problem is, you look at last year, Kyer Elam had to play significant snaps in the postseason because Benford couldn't stay healthy. So we've almost seen this movie before with a superstar corner not staying healthy. And for Beane and McDermott, do you pay a guy who has not proven yet he can be available when you need him with the season on the line? Because Benford's rookie season, he wasn't available for that Bengals game, and we saw Jamar Chase completely cook the Bills secondary. Last year versus the Chiefs, he wasn't available that whole game, and the Chiefs picked us apart in that divisional round game in Buffalo. I
hate to let him
honestly,
cook, but he's right.
I might sound crazy for this, but I think because of Cook's availability, I would prioritize signing Cook, because other than a couple fumbles early in his career, which he has proven that he can clean that up. I mean, yes, you would like him to get better hands. You'd like him to be a better run or be a better pass blocker, but ultimately your best ability is your availability. And Cook has only missed one game in his career versus Benford has averaged like 4 or 5 games a season at this point. So I would honestly pay Cook over Benford. I mean, you guys might disagree because corner, I agree, is technically a more important position, but you got your corner's got to stay on the field in order to pay him.
I get the health issue with Benford, but I feel like running back is the more replaceable position. And you look at the Bills cornerback room right now, it's kind of weak outside of Benford. Like there's
What do you
not
mean weak?
well,
It's non-existent.
I mean there's Benford and then there's Benford and then there's Taron Johnson. That's really that is basically your cornerback room. Outside of Benford and Johnson, it's not very good of a cornerback room. And I think the Bills need to prioritize a Benford extension for that reason. Like you lose Benford after the 26th season, like you can't head into the 26th season not knowing if you're going to sign back your cornerback one. I think that's an issue you don't want to have in 2026. You want to make sure that your cornerback one is locked up on a deal heading into next season. Cook, on the other hand, I think you can enter, I believe, into next season without knowing if he's going to sign back or not. Because you have a guy like Ray Davis, who's up and coming. He had 6 touchdowns in his rookie season. I think he can take the throne over Cook if for some reason Cook doesn't want to come back or the Bills can't franchise tag him or reach on a long-term deal. So prioritizing cornerback is a need because if you look at this, Benford had the second fewest yards per target, 5.3. The next highest guy who was in first, it was Stingley. It was Derek Stingley. So you're talking about Benford as one of 2 of the best corners in all of football. You can't just allow Benford to a possible free agency walk at the end of 2026. You want to lock him up for 2026 and beyond because he's locked down when healthy, and I would take the risk 9 times out of 10 betting on him staying on the field than letting him walk after the 26th season.
Oh yeah, uh, you got that right. I would have actually been more in line with Ben's line of thinking if it wasn't the case that Christian Benford is a top tier cornerback in the entire league. I would definitely argue that he is much better than Derek Stingley Jr., who just got a massive payday. But to be completely honest, both of your arguments have quite a bit of value because
Mhm.
Benford does, in fact, have a tendency, it just might be, really bad luck in terms of injury timing for him to not be present when he's needed in the playoffs. But at the same time, on the other side, James Cook really is what made the offense so valuable last season because he was able to keep defenses guessing because he just run nonstop continuously over everybody. And they'd have to try to stop Cook. Meanwhile, that just allowed Shakir, Coleman, and the rest of them to get free. So, in an ideal world, yeah, let's pay both of them. But if it comes down to one or the other, I am literally defaulting to my statement, my mantra, my Tomlinism. It literally it says it at the bottom. I would much rather extend Christian Benford, and that is solely because of the level of talent Christian Benford has and the level of talent he brings to the Bills secondary. If he was a guy that was kind of mid to bad, then yeah, you don't even question it. You extend Cook and let what happens with Benford happen going into next season. But with how he plays, no, you got to extend him right away. Of course, you could definitely figure that his injury history is probably factoring into why extension talks might be taking as long as they are. But the way I see it, you need to get him prioritized much sooner rather than later, especially after Stingley just raised the market for quarterbacks everywhere. And, Benford obviously saw that. So get it done quickly, move on, and let the chips fall where they may with James Cook. Because for sure, if he leaves, Ty Johnson and Ray Davis are going to be those guys in the backfield. And besides, you just draft a running back if you think that negotiations with Cook aren't going to go well.
Yeah, that was another point I was going to hit on too. Is Beane has been really good at getting ahead of
Ben
the
has
curve
been very
with.
good. I agree. I have been.
Yeah, other than his internet.
I'll just say this. I guess um to close out this point real quickly, um I don't I agree Benford is absolutely elite, and I think being what he might be doing, just to rationalize. And yes, I know the price ultimately goes up because Sauce Gardner's next in line to get paid. There's other guys
Mhm.
who are about to get paid at corner. So waiting is not going to save them any money. But if Benford has more injuries next year, I think it would A, maybe discount his price, or B, you just ultimately decide to go in another direction because again, availability is your best ability, and not having a player like Trey White, Trey White's caliber on the field for all those playoff games hurt the Bills in 2 straight seasons. Technically 3 straight seasons, honestly, because
Mhm.
you had to. I mean, I guess you did go out and get a Rasul Douglas, who I guess last year was
Bring
an
him back.
adequate replacement.
Bring him
Um,
back.
and he even got hurt at the end of last season too.
I
But
don't care. Bring
I
him back.
mean, you're already at what 4 seasons in a row you've missed elite cornerback play in the playoffs. Like, I think if you're being a McDermott, like eventually you got to find a guy who is available, you know. I mean,
Way.
you look at a Trent McDuffie. He has had no issues staying healthy um for Kansas City, and when the games matter and all these critical moments of the season, they've had their elite level cornerback. So it's just something to think about. Um I still think the Bills, no matter what, they still currently need a corner. And even if they do make a move like re-sign Douglas, or they are to add Asante Samuel because his price is only
Oh,
going down by
Lord have
day,
mercy.
and I believe Asante Samuel's still unsigned, right?
He is.
Okay,
He's got a
because
lot
I,
of injury concerns, which is
I, I
why
do,
he's
and
being
that's
held.
another guy with injury concerns, right? So
More
even if
amazed
the
he's not a
Bills
Dolphin
were to
by
make
now.
another move like that, or even bring back Gilmore, which I know some people
Oh,
probably
Lord.
would not be in favor of that move, but honestly, I've seen enough people begging Stephon Diggs to come back to Buffalo.
Oh,
If I had to
God.
choose
Don't even.
between those two players, even after what he said about Buffalo, which I kind of understand at the time because he necessarily wasn't wrong, even though it has changed completely since he did originally leave for New England and become a defensive player of the year winner and win a Super Bowl and pretty much build a Hall of Fame um, career outside of Buffalo. I mean, it would be poetic for him to come back and win a bowl where he started originally. And he's proven that even in his old age, he can still play. And ultimately, he has not had the injury concerns that some of these other corners have had. So, I mean, I wouldn't even be opposed to bringing in a Gilmore, but whatever you do, you got to draft someone semi early. But we've kind of been on this topic for a while. I know we got some more stuff to get through, and the technical difficulties has definitely prolonged this show a lot. But let's just quickly get to the defensive line. Just talking about another player with injury concerns and obviously the suspension. So I guess we'll just kind of combine this topic. You
As
know,
we should.
with Bosa, you obviously have a risk of injury.
Arguably a lot worse chance of him getting injured than
And
Asante Samuel Jr.
Mhm.
itself, and, and I am actually a big fan. I'm a big fan of the Joey Bosa signing. Um, I I've always been a fan of Joey Bosa since he's been in the league, to be quite honest with you. But obviously he has injury concerns too. And then you signed two players that ultimately are going to miss the first 6 games of the season with suspensions, which we kind of touched on earlier. Does that change the Bills' draft strategy? And I mean, I don't really think there's a huge risk as far as the Bosa signing, because it is only for 1 year and it was only for 10 million. So even if he, slips, knock on wood, he doesn't do this, but even if he slips and falls and breaks his leg in training camp and misses the year,
Good
they
Lord.
still won't really. I mean, they didn't. The issue with the Von Miller contract, it was the years, it was the guaranteed money, and you don't have that with Bosa. But with Bosa, they get a player who's 5 years younger than Miller, and to my knowledge, I mean, I know he's had some injuries, but I think it's just been like different polls and stuff like that. I don't think Bosa has ever had a severe injury like an ACL, and I know Von has had 2 ACLs. I mean, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, he doesn't have as bad of an injury history as Von. I mean, don't get me wrong, he still needs to stay healthy, but I don't think it's a huge risk. But I also don't think the suspensions ultimately change the Bills' draft strategy, because I think even if they did, I mean, it might as far as the later rounds go, because they'll have more roster spots to fill as far as on the defensive line, and you're going to have to find bodies for the first 6 games, whether those are late round draft picks or guys like Jordan Phillips or Shaq Lawson to come back, on 1-year deals and just sit on the practice squad the rest of the season, in case someone gets hurt to be
Oh,
called
Lord.
up. But I think the Bills need to attack. Even if Hoyt and Ogunjobi didn't get suspended, you only have 3 players, or 4 players technically, if you include Dwayne Carter, but you only have 4 players under contract past the 2025 season on the defensive line, because Daquan Jones has 1 year left on his contract. AJ Epinesa is on the final year of his contract, and Joey Bosa is on a 1-year deal. So other than Michael Hoyt, he's the only one they signed longer than 1 year in this free agency class. And other than that, you just have Greg Rousseau and obviously Ed Oliver, and then Devon Solomon and Dwayne Carter on rookie deals. But we still really don't know what we have in either of those players, although they did show flashes at times. But I mean, you would expect a bigger role in year 2, but ultimately, I think the Bills still got to attack the defensive line earlier, especially the one tech position, because Ogunjobi isn't really a traditional one tech. He can play, and he's better in a 4-3 defense than a 3-4 defense, but you still need a space eater, and this is an elite defensive line draft, so they better take an absolute unit on the defensive line, whether it's a Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon, Tyleik Williams, even a guy like Deion Walker from Kentucky. I love Alfred Collins, Darius Alexander. There's names and names and names at the position that you can. Even Joshua Farmer. I mean, I know he didn't have the most productive year at FSU, but I mean, he's still shown flashes and has had a good combine and Senior Bowl process. So, I mean, that's a guy you could even name that would be a good addition to the room on a rookie deal.
Get him in the later rounds. I am all for it. But I will piggyback off of your statement, Ben, or what your internet was trying to make you say. But gonna quickly touch on that. No, they don't have to change any kind of the strategy in the draft with the suspensions to Hoyt and Ogunjobi, especially because, you're still trying to get younger on defense. I would definitely be surprised if they decided, oh, we signed these 2, even though they're suspended for the first 6 games. Let's change up the entire process. because no, there's no reason to. Get a guy like Kenneth Grant with your first round pick. Oh man, you have immediately put a massive body on the defensive line, and that is going to be huge because that's what you were lacking all year last year.
Tyleek
You,
Williams too, right?
oh my God, yes. Either I'm all for Kenneth Grant or Tyleek Williams in round one. Like, probably if you had to
Big
consider,
body people movers.
yes, because that's exactly what the Philadelphia Eagles have. Big body people movers. That's the exact kind of approach that you need to emulate. Big body people movers on both sides of the ball. I know people like to throw around the term draft crush. I see it all the time on Twitter. And yeah, if I had one, it's Kenneth Grant. Right behind Kenneth Grant is my boy Azare Thomas. And I still am in full, I don't know whether you'd call it denial or whether you'd call it a prediction, any kind of like regular prediction that he'll be around when our first second round pick comes around.
Hmm.
But I would absolutely try to trade up in the second round for Azare Thomas if there was like a run on quarterbacks. If Trey Amos was gone quickly. But no, the overall idea behind the Bills drafting does not need to change with the signings that they've made. The Joey Bosa one's interesting too because admittedly, yeah, I also have been a big fan of Joey Bosa, like really big fan, but he can't stay healthy. He's had 2 healthy seasons, period. In
Yeah.
both of those healthy seasons, though, he looked like an absolute game changer for the defense. And if you could get that out of him, which is what the Bills are trying to do, then you have got an absolute, you've got a generational talent that could just ruin the lives of offensive linemen and quarterbacks. The thing is, though, he can't stay healthy. But
Yeah.
if that's why I'm really glad, to Ben's point, that this whole deal was 1 year, 10 million, and none of it was guaranteed. The guaranteed money is what kills you in cap space. The fact that nothing in Bosa's deal is guaranteed is the best thing that they could have possibly done. Because if he balls out, yeah, that was what you're kind of hoping for. But if something happens and he tears his ACL at training camp, hopefully not. But if that were to hypothetically happen, you don't really lose anything because you're bringing him in on a risk versus reward type deal.
Yeah.
Anyway, I also want to touch on one more thing Ben said because I just have to say it. When he talked about Stephon Gilmore, I would love to see Stephon Gilmore with the Bills, if not just for depth alone and a veteran presence. Yeah, apparently he said some negative things about the Bills in the past.
It wasn't even overly negative though. He just said part of the reason he signed in New England, which it's kind of shade, but there's some truth to it. He wanted his family to be able to watch him on TV because the Bills at the time didn't get any national games because they had been in the gutter.
Yep. Okay. Now he at the time, yeah, he was right. He was
And that was at the
absolutely right.
time as well as blackouts were still part
Yep.
of the NFL.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep. And the Bills, I mean, they had a lot of blackouts during the
Yeah.
2000s because,
yeah.
I mean, I don't blame
For
the
sure.
fans for not wanting to go to games. I mean, you kind of see it with the Sabres, even though I don't believe there's blackouts in the NHL.
No.
Unless,
ought to
you
be
know,
for-
it's a Canadian team and then the arena is filled with Maple Leafs or
Maple
Ottawa
Leafs.
or Canadians fans. But yeah, I mean, also, if the Bills are to take our boy from FSU and
Azare.
Azare Thomas, what better mentor than one of the
Mhm.
best man cover
Freaking Stephon
corners
Gilmore.
from the last decade in the NFL, right? Like
Mhm.
if you have Azare learning under Gilmore,
Oh
and
man, he'll
then you
be
can
elite.
really
Okay.
play more man.
Yep.
I mean, the interesting thing about that too, because this kind of actually goes into our next topic, which is how big of a need is the corner position. And first, I would say, yeah, first round. It's got to be, as much as I love Matthew Golden. I'm sorry to first of all, I don't even think Matthew Golden will be there. So sorry to throw water on your dreams, Paul, and crush your
Right.
dreams, but it's absolutely going to be defense that
It needs
first
to
round
be.
pick.
Yeah.
Like it's
Absolutely.
going to be. I mean, I know there's some smoke now with Landon Jackson, which I would
Oh
absolutely
Lord.
not want in round one.
Yeah, no
Round
way.
two, I guess just because he has some athletic, freaky traits, and maybe besides behind Bosa and Rousseau, he can be an impactful player. But as far as round one goes, it's got to be a corner or defensive tackle. I mean, I guess if we go to a more man scheme too, that could also be a reason why they haven't paid Benford, because they might want to see how he does in man to man, because he's primarily been a zone corner at Villanova and his early time in Buffalo. So I'm not sure exactly. We'll see whatever happens with Benford. I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea for him to play out this year and prove that he can stay healthy. And if he does and has an elite year, then pay him every penny he's worth, the 20, 25, 30 million, whatever.
Yep.
But I'm not opposed with the
That's where I'm at.
strategy that they've given Benford, because if he misses an important playoff game again, you can't give him over.
Nope.
I don't even think you give him over 20 million. Like,
Oh,
you would have
shoot,
to
no.
compromise and give him like a DJ Reed tier
Mhm.
contract, because at that point he's really not a corner one, because you need your elite corner one who's shutting down one half of the field, taking away the other team's best weapon available pretty much at all times, especially if you're going to be paying him that much. But I mean, I think corner absolutely has to be a top priority. In a lot of my recent mocks, I have taken Trey Amos. If it's not Trey Amos, I have taken either Azure Thomas, Maxwell Harrison, or Darian Porter in the second round. Those are four names that I would be absolutely thrilled if we were to add them. And I believe any of them are going to walk in and start day one, unless they're another Kyer Elam, which let's knock on wood and hope they aren't.
Please, no. That would absolutely crush me. We do not need another Kyer Elam situation.
No, not at all.
Personally, I think corner can be addressed in round two, because
it's Azure Thomas.
all those names that you mentioned, all four of those names that you mentioned, Ben, I think they all go in the second round.
Wait. I just had a thought. I just randomly remembered someone, I forget whose tweet this was, talking about cornerbacks. Imagine a scenario where the Bills are so desperate for a cornerback, they find a way to try to trade up and take a guy like Travis Hunter. Could you imagine that? Could anyone imagine that? You'd have to get at least into the fifth
even if they got
pick.
a Will Johnson or Jahdae Barrett, that is an absolute home run.
Could you imagine that, though? I still think defensive line is a more important need than cornerback, but it's not like a big gap. Like, it's about, 70-30 if you were going to look at it like that. But could you imagine the idea of them going that high and getting a guy like Travis Hunter? Good Lord. But no, that was just a really random thought, because Beane kept talking this year about being aggressive and willing to do whatever it takes. I'm wondering if that's in the equation.
You could see a trade, because we have all of these draft assets. So, I mean, like you said earlier, do the Bills really have room for 10 rookies on this roster? Probably not. I mean, you have a couple extra spots for the first 6 weeks with all those suspensions, but you got to figure that those guys are probably going to be later picks that are stashed on the practice squad, hopefully. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like, I mean, I think if we were to put a gun to my head as far as what the Bills are going to do round one, I would absolutely say, if I had to put money on it, the Bills are not picking at pick 30. It could be a trade down or it could be a trade up. But just knowing Brandon Beane's draft tendencies, I mean, you look at most of his drafts outside of, I believe even when he drafted Kyer Elam, he traded up. But outside of Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau, I believe every other time he's had a first-round pick, he's made at least one trade. Look at Josh Allen. He traded
Oh,
up
yeah.
multiple times to acquire Josh Allen. He
Mhm.
traded back up again to acquire Tremaine Edmonds in that same draft. Next year, drafted Ed Oliver. The following year, traded his first-round pick for Stephon Diggs. The year after
Mhm.
that, drafted Rousseau. And then came the Elam pick, which I believe he still traded up to get Elam after we missed out on McDuffie. Maybe that was our original pick. But then you go to the next year. Dalton Kincaid, which we traded up to pass Dallas to get Dalton Kincaid. And last year, obviously, we traded down with the controversial Worthy trade where we ended up getting Keon Coleman, which ended up being a great move for us. So,
Yep.
I mean, just looking at Beane's history and everything he's doing, it's going to be an interesting draft. And I kind of hope we do another live show for the draft
Yes.
again, because those are always a lot of fun, and we might have some even crazier reactions to when we took Keon Coleman last year.
Oh man, that was gold. We got to make sure that's on replay right before this year's draft.
Yes,
You and
we
me
should
were just
find
sitting
that.
there.
Yes.
You and me were just sitting there, absolutely going ballistic, while everybody else in that room just sat there going, "What is being doing?" It was great. I hope
Yeah.
that we have that Azare Thomas reaction, but that would then mean he would be a round one pick, and I don't think we were here for day one and day two last year. We might have been there for day two last year, but
No,
I
we
don't
were
remember.
there for day 2 because
Oh yeah, that's
Dean
right, we
Dean
were.
did join us last year.
Right.
He did.
Right,
Yep.
right, right. I remember that now. But yeah, it's gonna be great. I'm ready for it. Let You've got me going now because I had merely thought, okay, maybe something crazy happens, but no, now you got me really going. Like he does trade up quite a fair bit. So I'm curious to see how this ends. Now I'm kind of excited.
If the Bills decide to trade down, I'm not gonna hate it for the end of the world,
Oh, I
but
won't.
I would feel I would feel like it would you're just adding picks to your 10 that you already have. So like it wouldn't make sense if you're saying, well, Bean's not going to use all 10 of his picks, and then you say, well, Bean's going to trade down in the first round, because then now you're just collecting more picks. Are you trying to collect more so you can get back possibly into the third round? Could be. Do you want maybe a fourth second round pick?
Bet.
Possibly. But I feel like if the Bills are going to make any sort of move at 30, it's either they're going to pick at 30 or they're going to trade up. Maybe it's for a guy like a Hammond that's in the 20 to 25 range. Do they want to go get that man? Does our teams thinking about taking Grant maybe at 25, 26, 27? Well, the Bills are at 30, so anywhere within, 25 and 29. So there's always those small little things inside draft day where you might get a hint of, well, Grant might now go at 25. If he's our guy, do we trade up for
Yes.
Grant? And I think that would be something Beane would do. I mean, if if a guy like a Matthew Golden
Stop it.
falls, I think
Don't
that's
even
your
think about
aggressive.
it.
Don't even. Yeah,
I
no,
think
Yeah,
stop
we
it.
that's your
need
move.
we
We do
need
not need
defense.
offense round one.
Yes.
It is defense or bust.
I mean, that kind of goes into the next topic. How late is too late to take a receiver? And
Never.
I except round 1 is definitely too early.
Round
I would
one is
say
round
maybe the
4 is too
fourth
early.
round is probably the
Yep.
spot where you'll start to see guys like Horton is probably going to be off the board. Torrey Horton. Obviously, I think Ty Felton is gone at that point. Now Tez Johnson is an interesting name though because of his combine and Senior Bowl. I mean, honestly, from his Senior Bowl, he should have been a day 2 pick, but from his combine, his measurables obviously were questionable. And then he ran that, I wouldn't call it a slow 40 time, But for a guy his size and from the tape, it was a little shocking that he ran a 4.51. But I also think with his separation ability and just with what Brady does on offense, I think having a Tez Johnson could be a super fun piece in the offense. Although I would almost guarantee he goes to Denver because of his relationship with Bo Nix, and they just love Oregon players apparently. But
Yeah.
Tez Johnson's a fun name. Then you got guys like Ricky White from UNLV. Again, another guy who didn't run the fastest 40, but he has great deep separation ability. Um, Also can play special teams, which is going to be a needed role with Matt Collins signing in New England, obviously. Sorry to remind you again, Connor, but Ricky White is an interesting name. Then you also have Kyle Williams. The Bills have an opportunity to not only get another Kyle Williams on the team, but they could also add another Jordan Phillips. So how fun would
That'd
it
be
be
wild.
if they drafted Jordan Phillips and Kyle Williams? Except this Kyle Williams plays receiver. And if you actually turn on his tape, he might be, when it's all said and done, the steal of the draft because he has a talent to go second, third round. But I think because of some of these other receivers in this draft, it doesn't have the high end talents like a Brian Thomas Jr. or Neighbors, but there still is good wide receivers 2/3 that can be found in rounds 2 and 3. And you still obviously have Golden, Abuka, and obviously Luther Burden. So there's going to be wide receivers taken, and a guy like Kyle Williams might slide. I mean, I love both of the Iowa State receivers, but they're probably going second or third. But if you wait until the fourth, you might be able to get a guy like Kyle Williams who also has elite separation ability. He does have a little Khalil Shakir to his game too, but he is an absolutely electric player to watch. I mean, I believe he could play outside and win outside. He would be another deep threat to the offense, which I think the Bills did kind of solve a little bit with the Palmer signing. Now, I'm not saying he's a Hollywood Brown or a Tyreek Hill or Worthy as far as deep ability, but I think he's a good enough separator where he is going to get open down the field and he will open up the offense a little bit for Josh Allen and the underneath game between obviously Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, and Keon Coleman. And we'll see where Curtis Samuel fits into it. But I mean, I don't think on paper, to me, this is a better receiver unit than last year because going into the season, we didn't even have Amari Cooper, but the Amari Cooper we had last year was a shell of himself. I mean, Matt Collins, yes, you're going to lose his blocking and his personality, but I think you're actually going to get more from Coleman over the course of a full season. I mean, Coleman actually did give you more production than Hollins did besides receiving touchdowns, but he missed 5 games, but yards per catch, total reception yards, Coleman had still put up better numbers than Hollins in the regular season. And you figure Coleman's going to replace Hollins' production. Cooper, I actually think Palmer is an upgrade. And then whatever you get from Curtis Samuel, I think will be a bonus. And if we get the same Curtis Samuel from the end of last season, then that's another weapon. And obviously, Khalil Shakir is only going to get better each season with the work he puts in the offseason. And I think how this Bills offense is evolving. So, I mean, I still want depth and another weapon, but I think there are guys you could get in round 4. And we still had an elite offense last year, even. And y'all know me, I'm the resident Kincaid hater because he has not lived up to his draft stock, although it does take tight ends a little bit to develop. And he had injuries last year. I still don't think he's a perfect fit for the offense, but either way, he has to have a big role in this offense. And we got very little out of him last year. So you got to factor in Kincaid is almost another wide receiver, especially with how they use him. So between Kincaid, Coleman, Shakir, Samuel, and Palmer, I mean, those are a solid group of 5. I mean, Laviska Shenault is probably not giving you anything other than special teams. And I know they already have oh shoot, is it Codrington is our return guy?
Yes.
They have a
Mhm.
Brandon Coddington already, so I don't know if Chenault is anything other than last year's Chase Claypool, essentially, or this year's version of Chase Claypool, just a camp body, you know. But there's definitely room to add another body, but I don't think they need to add one early. I mean, I think if you get your checks out of the way, which is defensive tackle, corner, with your first two picks, if a guy is there who you're like, holy shit, that guy's still there and he's a receiver, you absolutely take him. And like,
Yeah.
for example, a Trey Harris or a Jaden
Oh
Higgins,
Lord.
if they are still there at pick 62, maybe you
Yes.
even trade up because you got extra draft capital, or maybe you trade back into the third round for a Ty Felton or a Torrey Horton if they're still available in the third round, possibly Jalen Knoll. But I mean, I think it's not a pressing need, but it's still within the top 4 of my needs for the Bills.
All right. Let him cook. I agree
Yeah.
with pretty much every bit of that, especially trading up to get a guy that you just can't believe is still on the board, especially if it's in the later rounds.
If you go through the Bills have within the rounds 1 and 4, I believe it's 5 picks before round 5. If you go outside of that, if you go outside of your top 5 picks isn't a receiver, I think you're taking a receiver too late. I think you have to take a receiver. I mean, in my personal preference, would be taking a receiver with one of your first 3 picks. Doesn't matter which order. It could be in the first round, it could be one of your first second round pick, or it could be your last second round pick. But in my preference, wide receiver has to be within one of your first 3 picks. That only because the Bills don't have a third round pick. If somehow the Bills can muster in a third round pick, okay, then I think the Bills can go defensive tackle or defensive end round 1, and then your first pick in round 2 could be your corner, and then you go back to defensive end slash edge in at to tail to tail out your second round picks, your first 3 picks. Then you go your third pick wide receiver. But the Bills don't a have a third round pick. So I kind of go back to the revert back. You can't leave one of your first 3 picks in this draft without a receiver. And getting a receiver within the top 100, I think, has to be a priority. The Bills wide receiver room, whether while it's great, it can be better. While it's good right now, it could certainly become better with another addition, like a Noel, Higgins, Royals, Harris, one of those 4 names, plus some of the other names that Ben said that you can get in the second round. So if you don't walk away with the wide receiver in your first 3 picks, I kind of will be disappointed, depending on if the Bills on draft day or night can muster up a third round pick for day 2.
Yeah, you punctuate that take with a sip of whatever you got in that thing, Paul.
Yeah.
Speak of takes, we moving on to the next thing, or is
I
that
think
That's
that
it.
is it, actually. So
all
we
right?
somehow,
Perfect.
actually, despite all the technical difficulties, which of course within the last like 10-15 minutes of the show, my connection is pretty
Spot
much
on.
perfect, right?
It
So
was. We want to restart the show.
no,
Oh yeah,
no, because then the internet issues are going to start all over again as soon as we
yes,
restart it. But
Don't
exactly.
bring
we
up the
did
name
survive,
Benford.
right? No, but anyways, even with all those internet's issues, only I guess 14 minutes longer than our average showtime, so still not bad, I guess. And that included, um, they were supposed to be quick. My quick take was a long take. And then
Blame your
the
internet.
Benford, yes, Spectrum specifically. Then the
Yes.
Benford discussion went on a little bit longer, but I mean we still were able to get through everything else. I mean, I guess we'll see. Do the Bills still have another move to make this offseason? I mean, I know a lot of people were
God,
speculating
would be
on
nice.
that Matt Milano cap space if a trade was coming or whatnot. We'll see. I mean, I guess it is still possible.
Perhaps.
Watch, something's going to break tonight, and we're going to have to make an emergency live pod because we end up getting TJ Watt or something like that.
I would be
it's just-
on the floor dead if that
I
happened.
know you
I
would
am
be.
not going to be on the show. I will be absolutely on the floor dead if the Bills pulled off a trade for TJ Watt. I'm telling you right now, I would die.
When we logged off last time, the Bills did sign Joey Bosa, so we'll see. We'll give it 15
maybe
minutes.
something happens because I mean there are still guys to add. But if not, I mean we'll still get some news here and there. I mean they'll probably still sign some tier 3 free agents, even if it's not a Gilmore or Samuel. Did Akilo Witherspoon ever sign a deal yet? Is because he's
No.
still an interesting name too. I kind of have I've kind of just pinned his name. If the other guy signs somewhere, he's just someone who's maybe a slight upgrade from a Dane Jackson. But yeah, other than that, I mean, there should be some more moves that are coming. So, they may not be big, but as we get closer to the draft, we'll start to see I think the Bills' strategy is already pretty obvious based on free agency and their interviews at the draft. But I mean, of course, it's always interesting to see just the pre-draft visits, the official pre-draft visits. I mean, the Bills were at the South Carolina pro day today, or Beane specifically, so they were getting an up-close look at Nick Emmanwori. So, I mean, that I guess is still an interesting player they could draft in or at pick 30, or maybe with a trade back or trade up or whatnot. But the draft picture is going to get more clear. The roster is probably going to be filled out, but I mean, as we get closer to the draft, it'd be great to have Dean on to kind of talk, his board and all the visits and interviews, because he always does a great job and we love having him on the show. So Paul, maybe just, see
I'll
if we can get him on within a couple weeks or so before the draft. That'd be great.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, hopefully next week Spectrum gets their shit together, so I'm not spending half the time buffering. And it wasn't even just me. I couldn't even hear you guys. So it was definitely a massive pain in the ass, but
wild.
Yeah,
but that happens.
But we were able to finish it though, so
battle through it.
Yep.
We weren't the first round upset.
Yep.
Absolutely worth it.
Thanks for tuning in. Go Bills.
Oh yeah, go Bills.
Yes. Go Bills as always.